Imagine getting paid just for sharing your thoughts on products and services you use every day. With Survey Junkie, it's that simple. Click on the link in the video description to discover how you can start earning today by taking surveys.
Here is a question that looms over the Edmonton Oilers as they begin the Stanley Cup final on Saturday night against the Florida Panthers. It's been more than 30 years since a Canadian team, the Montreal Canadiens, lifted the cup. The question is, if the Oilers don't bring the cup home to Canada, does it matter? If American teams forever claim the cup, can Canada at least still claim hockey's soul? The answer is complicated. Let's back up to a different Oilers era. In August 1988, Wayne Gretzky left the Oilers, a team with which he had won 4 Stanley Cups in 5 seasons. It was a gut-wrenching exit. Gretzky famously cried during the press conference to announce his departure. And indeed, it felt to many like something more profound had changed than Gretzky's move from postcode to zip code. The deal, he was traded to the Los Angeles Kings, wasn't just huge in terms of dollar value and player numbers. It was huge for the sport. Gretzky was a superstar, and his arrival in the U.S., in Los Angeles, no less, launched him into the sports stratosphere, alongside Michael Jordan and Bo Jackson. The Kings owner, Bruce McNall, toured the team around the U.S. during Gretzky's first preseason with the team, hitting what were then unconventional spots: Phoenix, Dallas, Las Vegas. At every one they were greeted by sold-out crowds. All of a sudden, hockey was big. Bigger than it had ever been. Hockey had made it in America. A few years later, in walked Gary Bettman, an American, a basketball guy, no less, as the NHL's new commissioner. It was 1993, the year the Canadiens would win the Cup, marking the end of Canadian victories for 3 decades. That November, the NHL referees went on strike, and Bettman quickly embodied a role he still holds for many Canadians. What is particularly galling to many is that Bettman's style may be a sign of things to come in the NHL, Mary Ormsby wrote in the Toronto Star that month. The big, heavy foot of American influence is just the start of change to what had been essentially a Canadian game. Already there were new teams in San Jose, Tampa, and Anaheim. 2 years after Bettman's arrival, the Winnipeg Jets left for Arizona. The following season, the Quebec Nordiques went to Colorado. Before the decade was out, there were teams in Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas. Back up north, the teams that hadn't yet departed Canada were broke, and threatening to leave. In 1998, Edmonton came within hours of losing the Oilers. The Ottawa Senators also teetered on the brink in 1999, as then-owner Rod Brydon looked to sell, to Portland, Vegas, or maybe Houston. And there appeared to be little sympathy from the NHL and its owners. In September 1999, the league and owners said they would commit to keeping the teams in Canada, but only if they got tax relief or if the NHL could take a share of hockey betting revenues from provincial sports lotteries. The Canadian federal government came through, but a year later the Calgary Flames were still begging to sell 14,000 season tickets to keep the team in town. Things changed after the new collective bargaining agreement was signed following the lockout in 2004 to 2005. A hard salary cap was introduced and, coincidentally, commodities prices jumped, boosting the Canadian dollar. The tax thing is still an issue. But these days, it's morphed into concern that lower, or non-existent U.S. state taxes woo the best players away from high-taxing Canadian markets. How else do you explain that Florida has sent its 2 teams to the Cup final for 5 consecutive years, and Canada sent just 1 in that span, huh? Yes, Canadian teams have indeed had their chances. Just 4 years after the Flames' near departure, they were in the Cup final. But they lost to Tampa Bay. A year after the full season lockout, the Oilers reached the final, but lost to Carolina. The following year, the Senators got there, only to lose to, Anaheim. Montreal reached the final in 2021's COVID bubble year. They also lost to Tampa Bay. You see the pattern, Canadian teams losing to expansion teams in southern U.S. states. The only break was 2011, Vancouver's loss to Boston. But that U.S. city's relatively northern position was little comfort, and each failure has stirred existentialism. If a Canadian team isn't winning the greatest trophy in hockey, is hockey still Canadian? If hockey isn't Canadian, what is Canada? Because, like it or not, an outsized proportion of Canada's Iden